I think that song would work for the sermon, and we're good. Just, we'll just move right to discussion. Um, I always appreciate the songs you select, Chuck. They add a lot. So, who taught you how to quit? Who helped you understand how to know when to quit and when to stick it out? And who modeled for you the different ways to end a job or leave a relationship, give up on a dream? Who gave you instructions on the importance of releasing yourself from an obligation in a dignified manner without burning any bridges? Who gave you lessons on how to pack it up, break it off, cut it out, shut it down, give it the elbow, kiss it goodbye, give it the old heave-ho? Did anyone teach you? Conversely, who taught you how to keep going and hang on? Everybody. We live in a culture that deeply values perseverance. Think of all the stories we've heard about how important it is to continue on even when we want to quit. Our role models are people who never give up. Our legends don't know the word quit. Weren't we all raised on the story of Thomas Edison, the great inventor, who is said to have made 1,000 unsuccessful attempts to create the light bulb? And then he finally did it? Well, where would we be if he hadn't seen it through to the end? Recent research is adding to this importance of perseverance, and studies lay out for us the fact that the one thing above all else that is needed for success is grit. Not talent, education, good looks, or who you know. The biggest predictor of success is the tenacity to deal with a setback, to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start all over again. And again, and again, and over again. Our society worships dogged determination. Think about all the interviews you've heard that equate achievement with not giving up. The reporter asks, how did you do it? How did you win, succeed, stay alive? To what do you attribute your victory or celebrity or survival? The answers are almost always the same, only the details change. Well, Tom, I just didn't give up. You know, Michelle, I kept working hard and giving it everything I've got. Gosh, Diane, I kept believing that I could do it. And Lester, I owe it all to God. That's it, folks. Those few basic rules will help you reach any goal, overcome any challenge, outperform anyone else. No matter how hard it gets, how long it takes, don't quit. Always give it your very best. No matter how discouraged or disappointed you become, keep believing in yourself, your dream, the surety of your ascendancy. And finally, make sure to thank God or the people in your life who made it all possible. These things may be true, and it's just not that simple. If we look at the Olympics, for example, the chances of an individual who tries out to get into the Olympics is roughly 1 in 500,000. Of the 11,656 athletes who made it to the games in 2020, less than 3% won gold. That's a whole lot of people not giving up, always doing their best, keeping the faith, and showing their gratitude. People who didn't win and didn't quit. We are obsessed with this whole notion of hanging in there to the point that it's almost comical. In doing research about quitting, I found there really is not much out there. Perhaps within the last, 10 years, there have become more articles and essays on how to know when it's time to quit your job. But most of the things, when I would look it up or read, watch a video, whatever, when I looked about quitting, the focus was on persevering. So the author seemed to say, if you're reading this, you must be thinking about quitting. Don't. Here's a pep talk to help you keep going. The whole idea of quitting is anathema. In our world, quitting is a very bad thing. And let's just start by acknowledging that it's not okay to quit. The thesaurus lists a number of synonyms for the word quitter. They are not nice. A person who quits is defined as someone who gives up easily, a person who lacks courage, one who shirks from duty or responsibility. Dropout, loser, coward, sissy, layabout, deserter, gutless, malingerer. Perseverance, on the other hand, is associated with moral character and trustworthiness. The maxims guiding our lives insist that what matters most is grit and stick-to-itness. Quitters never win and winners never quit. If at first you don't succeed, try harder. Successful people keep moving. They make mistakes, but they don't quit. And failing is not the worst thing in the world. Quitting is. Wow. No wonder we don't want to think about it. This last month, I learned that a dear friend of mine is filing for bankruptcy. You could have knocked me over with a feather. This woman is one of the most responsible, self-disciplined, conscientious people I know. For the sake of today's sermon, let's call her Elle. Several years ago, Elle started her own business. She had been meticulous in her preparations, setting herself up for success before leaving her steady job and leaping into entrepreneurship. And once Elle was up and rolling, it didn't take long for her business to thrive. And then COVID hit. And no matter how hard she worked or how creative she was at finding new ways to do business, she could not stay afloat. She kept trying. In fact, it was her perseverance and her sense of responsibility that continued digging the hole and brought her to the edge of no return. She and I talked about how painful and awful all of this was for her. The constant anxiety, sleepless nights, emphatic attempts, exhausting effort she experienced while desperately trying to save her business, to no avail. My good friend, like most of us, finally quit because she had no choice. I listened as she talked about the process of reconciling her reality with her dream. She shared how humiliating it was to have the creditors and debt collectors calling her. She explained the emotional and practical work involved in filing for bankruptcy. Not easy stuff. What surprised me most was my own attitude toward Elle after hearing her story. Our long history of friendship and affection and admiration between us didn't factor into my visceral reaction to her story of failure. And learning about Elle's quitting had a big impact on me. I respected her more. The expectation that Elle would succeed in her business was a no-brainer. Of course she would do well. And of course I would be proud of her for leaving her secure work to pursue her dream. I did not expect Elle to quit. Quitting was way harder than persevering. There was nothing in my competent friend that prepared her for calling it a day. She took the harder path. Elle has become my quitting role model. I watch her and I learn, oh, this is how you handle yourself when you have nothing left. Okay, this is a healthy way to keep your self-esteem and dignity when all around you would tear you down. Look, there is life after such a death. She has some happiness and there is service after going on. The quitting has not destroyed her. I am fascinated by the fact that I respect her more, because that was unexpected. Quitting has been much maligned in our culture. Yet, when talking to my hospice patients about regrets, most often they say they regret not quitting earlier. A job, a marriage, living to fulfill others' expectations. Quitting takes courage and strength. It's not easy to go against the dictates of our society. It requires a certain moral fortitude to seriously challenge what we think it means about ourselves to quit. Perhaps we should hear more pep talks telling us that we have what it takes to pack it in. Our disdain toward quitting makes it difficult to have an honest conversation around it. For most of us, the shame and guilt associated with quitting precludes any possibility of an open discussion. And there are few resources if you want to know how to navigate such foreign territory. Maybe that's why Paul Simon's song, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, is such a classic. There's advice. You just slip out the back, Jack. You make a new plan, Stan. You don't need to be coy, Roy. Just get yourself free. Here's the thing. Despite all the hype about sticking it out and staying on, quitting can be a very good thing. Quitting has great value. Generally, quitting redistributes things, including jobs and affection. Quitting creates spaces and opportunities for others. A surprising number of people can benefit when we let go. And the fact is, we are all quitters. We have all failed. We just don't talk about it. There's a false belief that it's easy to quit, but it's not really. Research and experience demonstrate that in many ways, it's easier to keep going on. There's a particular irony that we've all been raised on a steady diet of lessons on grit and perseverance. But the truth is that the culture is really preaching to the choir. Yes, there are lazy people, slackers, and folks who don't step up, but generally, human beings are hardwired to hang in there, not to leave or quit. All those adages like winners never quit and quitters never win aren't really necessary. What's hard for human beings is letting go. We are a conservative, loss-aversive bunch. How we think provides the superglue that keeps us stuck. We can thank our ancient forebears because there was no evolutionary advantage to have the Paleolithic hunter crawl back into the cave when they didn't bag the caribou, or give up if they failed forging a raging river the first time. Many of our habits of mind derive from a time in human history when the challenges of life were largely physical and perseverance tended to pay off. And even though that was then and this is now, our brains simply haven't caught up. There are several places where our minds get stuck. The sunk cost fallacy is the irrational thought that we should continue on with someone or something because of all of the time and energy and money we've already invested in it. If we give up, we believe that we've completely wasted everything we've done, even though we never get it back whether we stay or go. And we don't think of staying as an obstacle to something better. Our tendency to look for positive clues and being overly optimistic get in the way of knowing when to quit. Combining these things with intermittent rewards instills the idea that if we just try harder and don't give up, anything is possible. One of the biggest obstacles to quitting is hope. Just the tiniest bit of success can keep us going. The one day the boss says something that for once doesn't cut us off at the knees, or when our beloved actually does something that we've been begging for them to do. Suddenly we're no longer heading for the door, but settling in for a spell, totally sure that everything will work out okay. Most of us are aware that we can't become what we can't have becomes even more desirous. Not only do we chase what we can't have, we double down on our efforts. If we are told that something is impossible, this impractical pride sets in. We will expend an absurd amount of energy proving that we can indeed do what others said we could not. Sadly, after we've exhausted ourselves, we are dissatisfied and wonder if it was really worth it after all. We are afraid of making mistakes. Not quitting is a form of risk avoidance. We stay with the devil we know rather than chance the one we don't. We don't want the upheaval of change, or we don't know what else to do. Or our identity becomes intertwined with some aspect of our lives. I think of the patients I've known who continue unsuccessful courses of treatment because who would I be if I'm not the woman fighting cancer? It's also interesting to notice that we are far more likely to be criticized for ending something too early than for hanging on too late. People are more understanding of the poor souls who hang on to the bitter end than they are of the selfish or cowardly folks who jump ship. The shame and guilt associated with quitting, it's easy to understand why people stay too long. Quitting is akin to failure, and it's an easy slide from I failed to I am a failure. We fear that there forever will be a negative mark by our name. There is no room for grace. We are so abhorrent of quitting that many of us don't quit until we have no other choice. We quit because we can't go on. The body or the mind collapses. We get fired, laid off, or the business closes, or eventually we die. We have equated quitting with such moral failure that even when we are miserable, our health is suffering, and our spirits are deflated, we persist, thinking that even if we destroy ourselves in our perseverance, well, at least I didn't quit. It turns out that people who are able to quit earlier and more often generally have enhanced self-confidence and greater skills managing transitions than folks who avoid leaving at all costs. Research has shown that people who recognize the dangers or futility of a situation and quit easier have a broader sense of self. They do not define themselves by one activity and its rewards, such as a career. It's less stressful to end something if you already know that you have other good options, not just your career, but being a partner, having particular hobbies and crafts, all the other things that go into making us who we are, that we are not just this one thing. The people who are able to quit early, quit often, they're more focused on goals than avoiding mistakes. And the truth is that while our society has been extolling the virtues of sticking it out and steadfastness, we've been praising ourselves for doing what comes most naturally. And we've been denigrating the very thing that requires more of us. Quitting takes effort. It is not a passive event. Quitting is work, and it is an art. Before we are able to stop whatever it is that we've been doing, we need to imagine on some level, life can be different. We need to admit we have options. We aren't as stuck as we thought. Once the idea that we could leave a situation has gotten our attention, the careful process of discernment can begin. Why do we want to give up? Should we just push through, hold on, and get past this difficult time, trusting that things will get better? What information is my body telling me? Is staying harmful to my well-being, or will it build character? What do we think will happen when we quit? Will the upheaval that follows our leaving be worth it? Do we have goals and directions for the future? Do we have a plan? Do we have a plan B? Is this really the time to quit? How do we want things to end? There are times I wish I had been raised with a quitting role model. Someone to teach me what questions to ask, how to listen for answers, and when a line of questioning is a waste of time and energy. Granted, even if we did have a quitting checklist, no one can ultimately tell us what to do. It always ends up with us. We need to figure it out. Still, I wish I had more examples of what it looks like to quit well. Think back to those interviews with the winners. Wouldn't it be great if we heard a reporter ask, "So, how does it feel to give up on your dream? When was the moment you realized it was hopeless? How did you figure out that you just don't have it? Are you pleased with the way things ended?" I'd love to hear an interview like that. Sometimes this horrible thing we fear is the best thing that can happen to us. Quitting is usually harder than perseverance because of the way we're made and the way we've been conditioned to think. It is not passive or inherently destructive. Quitting easily and early may be a sign of a well put together individual, the opposite of a loser. Quitting is a skill and an art, something we generally are figuring out on our own. And perhaps someday that will change. Just as we're beginning to see articles about deciding if it's time to quit your job, it's possible that we might realize that most people could use some coaching on everything from resigning a job to leaving a relationship to foregoing further treatment for cancer. Finally, quitting is an act of faith. It is taking seriously the belief that things can be better, can be different, that this is not as good as it can get. Walking away and calling it a day is an action. It is a leap of faith, or sometimes a limp into faith. Giving up on the now, letting go of the dream, ending the partnership, stepping away from the obligation, and resigning from the job all demonstrate trust in a higher quality of life. In acting on our own behalf, we exhibit trust in who we are and our ability to maneuver into a happier, healthier existence. We are also acting on the notion that God or a benevolent universe, or at least chance, is on our side. Quitting is not just hanging in there and hoping. It's doing something. It's making a change. And whether we're strategic about it with carefully thought out resignation letters and requests for recommendations, or if we are just impulsive and throw our hands in the air declaring, "I can't take this anymore," we are casting our vote in favor of improvement. This is a different certainty than doggedly continuing on. It's a radical move. You might define it as a faith in yourself, in life, in God, in the goodness of the universe. But quitting is not passive, and it certainly exemplifies hope. The next time that you are tempted to quit, pause and sit for a moment with the possibility that hanging up may be the best course of action. Before you begin giving yourself the perseverance pep talk, think seriously about the various possibilities. Don't automatically assume that you should stay the course. Maybe it's time to quit. Stay for a little while in this holy moment. Don't brush it away because of your discomfort. Ask yourself how the holy is showing up with you right now. Quitting is not wrong, cowardly, or small. It is not necessarily the easy way out. It may instead be the harder calling. Just because our society has labeled it negatively doesn't mean that it's the wrong way to go. Quitting may be exactly what is most needed. Let us increase our vision and our own self-confidence. Let us courageously let go of what no longer serves us. Let us have the wisdom to quit early and without self-recrimination, and the adventuresomeness to quit often. And finally, let us rejoice in the faith that underneath it all, Quitting reminds us of the possibilities previously unseen. Amen and amen. So now, our theology says that I'm not the only one. You folks also have wisdom and experience and thoughts. So this is the time in our service for you to share, what do you know about quitting?
Well, this kind of goes into that, but it's just past 11:30, so we don't have a lot of time. We're going to have to quit pretty soon. So if somebody has a short comment to make, we can take a couple of minutes here. Kathy and I may be leaving the meeting early because she and I have to go to our rehearsal. So yeah, go ahead and jump in, and don't worry about being recognized. You can just mute yourself and go for it. Unmute.
I just want to say thank you. I think it was fabulous. So few people think that way, and for the people who probably should quit, it's such a good lesson. But it's also a good lesson for all those people who judge the people who quit. Thank you.
Okay.
So I loved what you had to say, Shelley. It was really, really insightful, and it's something I'd never considered. I grew up on a dairy farm, and you didn't quit. You had to do things, whether they were hard, whether their weather was bad, whether you wanted to or didn't want to. You didn't have a choice. And so it was refreshing to hear, yeah, we really do have choices.
It's nice to remind ourselves that quitting isn't evil.
Mm-hmm.
Oops. Sorry.
I am aware of the time, and I know that some folks stay after the service and continue to talk. So I would invite you to do that. But also just spend a little time noticing your desire to quit, when it shows up, and what you do with it. And before our extinguishing the chalice, I leave you with the words of that great theologian, Bobcat Goldthwait, who said, quit everything until you find something that you just cannot quit. We leave this gathered community, but we don't leave our connection, our concerns, our care for each other, our service to each other, to the world, and to our faith continues. Until we are together again, friends, be strong, be true, be well, be loving. And quit while you're ahead. Blessed be.
I was thinking about in listening to this, and I don't know if Chuck stopped the recording yet, but just a reminder that looking at things, competition, if